Hello and welcome. I'm Stephanie Rowley, Provost and Dean of Teachers College. It's my pleasure to welcome you to Academic Festival. I'm delighted to be kicking off this year's programming with this very exciting discussion that features a new and extremely important partnership for Teachers College and our very own Black Education Research Collective, led by Dr. Sonya Douglas Horsford. We'll also be joined today by David C. Banks, President and CEO of the Eagle Academy Foundation, and Marielys Divanne from the United Way of New York City. The panel focuses on City Council's landmark initiative, the Education Equity Action Plan, a coalition effort to develop an interdisciplinary K-12 Black Studies curriculum for New York City schools in partnership with TC's Black Education Research Collective, or BERC. Also, the United Way of New York City, the Eagle Academy Foundation, the Association of Black Educators of New York, Incorporated, and the Black Edfluencers-United. BERC will play a lead role in the creation of the curriculum, as well as a professional development program. BERC and our partners here today will collaborate to actively engage teachers, principals, and community members throughout the process. On behalf of Teachers College, I would like to especially thank the New York City Council's Black, Latino, and Asian Caucus for the vision and leadership in working to secure the $10 million in City Council funding for this initiative, and the New York City Department of Education for its support and collaboration. This is truly a groundbreaking initiative. Just a month ago, I had the pleasure of joining our partners here today at the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture in Harlem for the formal unveiling of the Education Equity Action Plan, designed to pave the way for the creation of a citywide K-12 Black Studies curriculum for New York City public schools. It was an incredibly inspirational day, filled with so much history and hope for what we can all accomplish for our students and schools and the future when we work together. Sonya, can you share a bit more about the impetus for the project and its objective?
Thank you, Provost Rowley. I'd be happy to. As you mentioned, the Education Equity Action Plan is an effort being led by a coalition of partner organizations, including the Black Education Research Collective, which is affiliated with the Gordon Institute for Urban and Minority Education here at Teachers College, the Eagle Academy Foundation, United Way of New York City, Black Edfluencers-United, and the Association of Black Educators of New York. And through the leadership and support of the Black, Latino, and Asian Caucus of the City Council, and in collaboration with the New York City Department of Education, we're working to advance educational equity through the development of an interdisciplinary PK-12 Black Studies curriculum that will improve the educational experience for students of color and the quality of education provided to all students in New York City. Earlier this summer, Burke had released a research report that measured the impact of the pandemic and systemic racism on the education of Black students, and findings revealed that Black Americans' trust in schools and other public institutions has eroded significantly by governmental and institutional responses to the coronavirus outbreak, police brutality and violence, and the January 6th insurrection at the U.S. Capitol. And so, despite those troubling findings, we are certainly excited to serve as the research partners in this pilot project as part of this coalition, since we at Burke really believe that much can be accomplished when education researchers, practitioners, and policymakers collaborate in service of what's best for the education of all of the students that we serve. And so I'd like to actually invite David Banks, who was really instrumental to the development of this project, to tell us more about the origins of this work.
Thank you so much, Sonya. This is a real honor to be a part of this initiative, because what it represents is when people who have great intentions come together to organize and to work toward a goal and to see the manifestation of that happening. That's an empowerment moment. And so, during this COVID outbreak and the time that so many of us were away from our kids and our schools, we really started to talk about what a reimagined school experience could really and should really look like. And I've been working for the last couple of years to create an organization of Black educators called the Black Edfluencers-United. And the reason why that was so important was because there was not any real organization that was in place with substantial numbers of Black educators who were focused and actually creating an agenda um, for Black students and Black educators and Black families. And so we decided to work together. We've been doing that over the last couple of years, and that resulted in the creation of the Black Edfluencers-United. During the pandemic, we came together with state elected officials and had meetings, many meetings with them around policy issues, changes that needed to be made in the state system. As a result of those meetings, and they were involving lots of assembly folks, state senators, the city council and members of the Black and Latinx, and Asian City Council caucus came to us and said, hey, we've been hearing about these meetings you've been having. You should be meeting with us because we need to hear about the issues at the city council level, and particularly the leadership of Donique Miller, city councilman, and Adrian Adams, who were the co-chairs of that caucus, who took the lead and met with us on a regular basis, saw some of the suggestions for change that we were talking about, and then took it to the leadership at the city council. And what it has resulted in is this commitment, this investment to be made in the creation of a Black Studies curriculum, which we're just tremendously excited about. But one quick anecdote that I will tell you is so interesting. When they brought it to the leadership, including the speaker and the head of the education committee for the city council, their response was, absolutely, we should be doing this. And by the way, we thought this was in place already. We couldn't imagine that over all of these years, with all the Black organizations and folks who've been out here on the ground doing work, that you didn't already have a Black Studies curriculum in our school system. So they said, this seems a little late, but absolutely, they got behind it right away, and that has put us in the position of being in the place that we're in today.
It's really incredible to hear how collaboration across these groups really brought together this exciting project. So I know it's still early in the process, but what types of topical areas and content do you anticipate being included in the curriculum?
Thank you so much for creating this space. The vision for the curriculum is that it will be an interdisciplinary curriculum for the full school system. And we're hoping pre-K to 12. What we can say is that it will acknowledge and share the history and contributions of Black people pre-slavery and through modern times, and that it would allow us and the students to explore topics in early African civilization and the continuum of the Black experience in America, including and across peoples of the African diaspora, and again, modern times, for example, the impact of systemic racism across America. So this is a really exciting moment, and it is an exciting curriculum that would allow every child to learn of the rich contributions of Black Americans.
And let me just add as well that it is really important that this history very intentionally not start with slavery. That everyone recognizes that the history of Black folks began in the motherland of Africa, in the continent of Africa, and we were brought here as slaves. And so, I've seen other curricula which starts our experience at slavery, and that is certainly not where we should be in telling the story about who we are and the story of Black folks. And once our experience here, the notion of the era of Reconstruction, the Civil Rights Movement, and so many areas that there are for us to really to engage. Those who've been brought together, really led by Sonya and others, who are going to really help to shape what that experience is and how it's told. That's a heavy body of work. But the goal is for all of our students throughout that pre-K through 12 experience to understand it. And that's not just for Black students. This is for everybody to understand the contributions of Black folks in this country, people who fought, bled, died, and sacrificed to help make America what it is and to represent the potential and promise of what America ultimately could be. It's something that that's what we're going to lean into.
I would just say that in addition to really ensuring that we're documenting the history and the contributions of Black Americans and individuals of African descent, the ways of knowing and learning are also something that we're really focused on as part of this process. So in addition to curating and developing a curriculum, we are also thinking about how teachers teach this curriculum and ensuring that they are prepared to engage in the cross-cultural teaching awareness and leadership that's going to be required of them as well. And so we're really excited that educators are excited about this. We're having a lot of people reaching out to us to, one, celebrate this opportunity as well as find out how they can be involved and engaged. So I think it's just a really exciting and transformative time for education where we're really rethinking how people learn, what they learn, incorporating the science around learning that we now have that's really valuable and helping to make sure that all students, that we're meeting all students where they are and that we're pulling out their brilliance. And as Professor Edmund Gordon always says, we're not filling buckets, but lighting fires. And so we also see that as really being instrumental to the work that we're doing.
Yeah, the current curriculum as it's situated now is across the New York City Department of Education is very scattered, particularly as it relates to the teaching of Black history. It will vary from school to school, and even at its best, it's fairly limited in scope to some study of Dr. Martin Luther King and the Civil Rights Movement. But you can literally go through a K-12 experience, and other than some, week-long or a couple of weeks-long projects during Black History Month in a selected school, not really wind up fully engaged around the knowledge of the Black contribution to America at all. Or again, very limited, in pieces within teaching of American history, even more limited in the scope of global history that's taught at the high school level. And so I think that is a huge part of the reason why it's a great opportunity for us to help fill a void that has been screaming out to be filled for quite some time. It's interesting as an aside, during the protests in the NFL, when Colin Kaepernick took a knee, one of the most successful quarterbacks in the NFL, Drew Brees, the Hall of Fame quarterback from the New Orleans Saints, he said, "I could never take a knee because my father and my grandfather fought and died for this country." And he received a lot of backlash about that because in saying that, he was suggesting that our folks had not fought, bled, and died for this country. And he had to be schooled. And in fact, when he was told that the first man to die in the Revolutionary War was a Black man, he said, I never knew that. I never heard that. And it just spoke to this notion around how so many white people across America have no idea about the contributions of Black folks, other than the fact that they knew that we were slaves. And then some years later, Martin Luther King Jr. came along. So when you don't hear those stories and that narrative is not told, it suggests that we are not worthy. And so this is not something simply for Black students; it's for all students to understand. Will it make young Black people feel better about themselves and understand that they stand on the shoulders of people who sacrificed and were great people? Absolutely, and why not? But it also says to everybody else that they're not the center of the universe, and that there are many people who have contributed to this American ideal, if you will. And it's not just Black folks as well. And so I think this is really the beginning of a process where we are much more intentional about telling the stories of so many different people who have contributed to this American story.
And if I may jump in on that as well, I think what you just explained and what brings your comments bring up for me, David, is, and I've heard you talk about this before, is the danger of that single story. When we only hear about one particular experience, when children of color, when Black children don't know that the first soldier to die in that war was a Black soldier, and white children also don't know that, we are repeating the cycle of only one type of story. And we are forgetting to acknowledge what even the research says, and that is when we have culturally relevant stories, when we have a real depiction of the contributions of Black children and Black Americans in the United States and beyond, that we all get to learn and grow and understand that the world is so much larger and that it isn't just about one particular perspective. And so I think, as you said, it will be life-changing for all, not only Black students, but yes, definitely for Black students and for all students in the New York City schools.
David, you were principal of a few schools. Of course, you founded the Eagle Academy for Young Men, the first school in a network of innovative all-boys public schools in New York City. David, we're proud to claim you as a TC alum, as a member of the first cohort of the Kahn Fellows in 2003, which is a selective leadership program for principals that was founded at TC. Your approach to educating young men of color, which emphasizes school-community partnerships, has become a model for the rest of the country. Can you tell me more about how these two curricula fit together? What are related activities that you managed at Eagle Academy that may have informed your approach in this new curriculum?
Well, thank you for that. I think one of the things that's important to know is, first of all, why we created Eagle Academy in the first place. And I say we together with 100 Black men of New York created the Eagle Academy. And the Eagle Academy was really created because we were watching the all the negative indicators of success that were taking place in the system, were always about Black and brown young men. And in Columbia University actually put out a report that said that 75% of the state's prison population came from 7 neighborhoods in New York City. And you think about that, the vastness of New York State and all of the various locales, that 75% of the entire state's prison population came from 7 neighborhoods in New York City. These are the neighborhoods that we refer to as the prison pipeline. And people were writing books about it. They were analyzing data. But it seemed like the most you could hope for was a good after-school program for 25 boys. And we decided we needed to do more than that. And that's why we created the first Eagle Academy for young men in the Bronx. I was asked to be the principal of that school, and I graduated the first class before moving to the Eagle Foundation, where we've now created a school in every borough in New York City, including one in Newark, New Jersey as well. So what's the focus? We have 3,000 young men across our schools. We've graduated over 2,000, sent them to colleges and universities across the country. And why have we been successful? We've been successful for several reasons, but they all are ultimately about how we have helped to affirm the positive notion of identity for our young men, and that they recognize that they come from a lineage they're part of a lineage of people who are proud people and who are great people. And these young men have internalized that in a way that is amazing. So when you come to the Eagle Academy, you're part of a house structure. Everybody in the school is coordinated and they compete and organize across houses. And the houses are named after individual men of distinction, like Frederick Douglass or Malcolm X or Barack Obama. There are different names across the different schools. But what it does is it instills a sense of strength and pride in the young men to identify with their house and with that particular individual, while they're still learning about the greatness of Black people throughout their entire experience. And the experience goes from 6th grade all the way through the 12th grade. And so it got encapsulated for me in one moment where I sent 3 young men to Wheelock College in Boston. And the president of Wheelock College called me, an African-American woman, Dr. Scott, and she said, Jackie Jenkins Scott, and she said, I don't know what you're pouring into these boys, but let me tell you, they didn't just show up on this campus. They were leaders on this campus. And I want you to come, and we want to give you an honorary doctorate at their graduation. And I showed up, and I'm on the stage, and she's about to talk about the great work we've done at Eagle. And in an auditorium of over 3,000 people, three young men from Eagle Academy stood up in their caps and gowns, and they said out loud in front of everybody, "Out of the night that covers me, black is the pit from pole to pole. I thank whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul." They recited the poem Invictus. It's the poem of resilience. It's the poem that Nelson Mandela recited every day for 27 years that he was locked up on Robbins Island. He said it's the only thing that kept him sane. Every young man that enters the Eagle Academy knows that poem, recites it every single day at our town hall. And in that moment, they were paying tribute to their Eagle experience. And each one of those young men graduated and went off to have a successful career for themselves. I tell you that story to simply say this: the connection to an affirmative identity curriculum is not just a nice thing to do. It is an essential component for the ultimate success of young people, not simply to graduate from school, but to walk away understanding that they have a responsibility, that they are accountable to the community which bore them, that they have to come back to help make life better for the people in their community. That is what the Eagle Academy represents. That is what the notion of Black studies represents at its core. It's a fuel. It's food for the soul. That's why we're so excited about it. And in many ways, it is represented by the Eagle experience.
My goodness, I have chills imagining the promise and opportunity that we have in front of us. So exciting. Marielys earlier said something about aligning the village, and I see that happening right here. So I wonder if you could say more about that and how you as a portion of the village are coming together and what your roles are going to be in this process going forward. So how are you working together, and then where are you in the process at the moment?
Yes, that's a good question. Thank you. The alignment of the village is key because we see this moment and this initiative is so important that it must be owned across the board, and it must be owned with the level of expertise and experience that all of the partners are bringing to the table. The goal is that in my work with United Way of New York City, and as we stand in a space of aligning and bringing the different sectors together, is that the current partners as Eagle Academy Foundation, United Way of New York City, Burke, ABENY, BU, that we are pulling our relationships, our partnerships, our members to curate that expertise and ensure that it doesn't just live within us, but that there is true stakeholder engagement, that we have the important voice of parents, that we have the important voice of students, that we have the important voice of the African-American educator that's been calling for this for years, that we have the voice of the scholars in the city, in this nation, to truly be aligned and to pour our energy, to pour our desire to see this succeed. And so that is what we're doing. The effort is not only the creation of a amazing curriculum and with professional development attached to it, but that it is engaging in a process that would allow folks to own it, to want to champion it, because at the end of the day, an amazing curriculum, which I know will be built with the partnerships that we have here and Dr. Horsford and all of the amazing experts and scholars that have been pulled together, and all of these stories and the energy from across the board in the city and beyond, it will be created. But we don't want that to be shelved. We want it to be used. We want it to be in every classroom, to reach every student, to reach overall, to be available for the full system. And the way to do that is to not do that in a vacuum or in isolation, but to align throughout the sectors. And definitely United Way of New York City is excited about that, of pulling in all of the different partners and to be in this space and to do it in a way that is reflective of what the community, parents, students, educators want.
Wonderful. So, Sonya, I wonder if you could say a little bit more about what you anticipate the role of Burke and our amazing students and faculty and staff here at Teachers College.
Well, I think for Burke, this is really the beginning of what we see as an exciting and watershed moment in the history of education in New York City and in the country, as we're undergoing a racial reckoning, and I'd like to call it a racial awakening around making sure that our educational system is actually helping to develop the types of citizens and individuals that can make this country what we believe it can and should be. For generations, we've struggled as an education community, and I think this is also the case for the policy community, around how we reform American education, which was designed as a dual system of education, one that is still separate and unequal, into one that adequately supports the academic, social, and emotional learning, growth, and development of our children. And so, I think, again, and I sense the excitement that especially the TC community has expressed among our students, our faculty, and alumni around what this moment means and how modernizing and revamping the curriculum to ensure that it's inclusive and rethinking how we teach diverse learners is an incredible way to accomplish this. And for me, is actually the way that you engage in meaningful integration by integrating the ideas, the ways of knowing, the experiences, and the contributions of all members of the community and society. So we hope that this sparks a movement across the country so that all students will benefit from what we're hoping to provide to students in New York City.
Really incredible. So at this time, we will answer some questions submitted from the audience. First, how will partnering across these various institutions make this proposed curriculum more likely to succeed? And that's for anyone in the group.
I'll jump in. That's a great question. I think that it will make it more likely to succeed because not one partner is saying we have every single expertise, but we are together stronger. When we are together, we are stronger, and we're aligning the expertise of amazing institutions, of amazing organizations. And that ownership is contagious, we hope, and ignites urgency and ignites responsibility across the board for all that are involved. And it also gives us an amazing collective of people that want to see this happen and will do the work necessary to make it happen. It also allows us to talk about this as not something that lives only within one sector of New York City or one sector of our community. It is really something that every sector will benefit from. When a child understands the contributions of his or her people, of their people, when a community understands the contributions of Black Americans in society, it makes us all stronger. And so every single sector is to benefit from this.
I feel like we could have an entire conversation about that right there. So I do recognize that this question is a huge question, especially for so early in the process. But when do you anticipate this curriculum being implemented and fully adopted by the New York City schools? Are there plans to propose this be adopted beyond the city, statewide, or even at the federal level?
So we're on track to develop a curriculum that will be delivered to the Department of Education at the end of June, along with the professional development program. In terms of whether or not this will be adopted and implemented beyond New York City, I mean, I know for the research team that we have and the partners that we're working with, we certainly hope that it will. We know that there is a movement afoot in many states and districts across the country to adopt ethnic studies curriculum and to also mandate more professional development training and opportunities around culturally relevant education. And so I know that at Burke and in working with the faculty at UME and across the college, there's certainly an interest in what we learn from this work and ensuring and hoping that it becomes adopted and implemented for every student in New York City, as well as how we take what we're learning as part of this process to expand it in spaces across the country. Again, this is a pilot year. This is the beginning of a sustained effort to really transform curriculum and professional development. And so we see the sky is the limit, and are again really excited to just be a part of this partnership, to be able to work with the Eagle Academy Foundation, United Way, Black Edfluencers-United, and ABENY to make this happen.
Wonderful. So, in districts that do not have approved Black Studies programs, how can educators make required curriculum that is not actively Black-centric more inclusive to all students?
Well, if you're specifically talking about districts within New York City, I don't know if that's what you're referring to, but specifically within the city of New York, there's a great deal of influence that springs from the chancellor's office with respect to direction around overarching curricula. So within the city itself, this is going to be something that will be important and will be embraced at the chancellor's level, and has already been so. And so that's part of the reason why we're also excited that it will represent a real opportunity. For districts outside of New York City, they're going to have to come to grips themselves with the fact that telling the history of Black folks in America is telling American history. It's not a separate story, and I think that's important to say. And if we're going to tell the truth about American history, you cannot tell the truth about American history without telling the full story around what has happened for folks in the Black experience in America. And that's what we're committed to doing here. There are schools that are grappling with this all over the country, and not always in the best of ways. And I suggest, this is my own personal, sense of it, is that people who are in power operate from a position oftentimes of fear in telling the whole story. Because the reality is that when telling the whole story of America has a huge part of it, which is a shameful past, particularly in how it dealt with Black people in America. It's just the truth. Germany had that as part of its history, but reconciled that and has moved forward. America has yet to reconcile the Black experience in America. And so, the districts that are prepared to do it are moving forward. The districts that are continuing to struggle and otherwise be resistant, they'll get there, just maybe a little later than it is sooner. But hopefully what we do in a place like New York will be something that people can look at as a model, to say, hey, if you can do that in the largest school district in the country, why can't you do that in all these other smaller districts around the nation? And this is not to be confused with critical race theory. And a lot of people have tried to bring those together. We're simply talking about culturally relevant curriculum that in fact talks about the contributions of Black folks as part of a Black Studies program, and that's the value and proposition that we're going to stand on.
Thank you. I'd like to thank all of our panelists for joining us and sharing their valuable expertise with us. This has been a powerful discussion, and I so look forward to our collective efforts that will result in more equitable representations of our communities in curriculum in New York City and ultimately in other parts of the country. Thank you for joining us for the opening session at Academic Festival. We hope you'll tune in for more later today and this week, including President Bailey's address and the Alumni Awards ceremony taking place this evening at 5 p.m. Eastern Time.